And maybe you've noticed it recently, because I know I have. Conversations that used to feel easy now feel pretty draining. And the friends that used to hype you up seem a little uncomfortable when you share your wins. Your family still talks to you like you're the old version of yourself, the one who played small, who doubted themselves, who didn't ask for more. And here's the part that feels the hardest. You feel a little guilty. Welcome to What If It All Goes Right, the show for high achievers who are ready to stop fearing the worst and start stepping into their power. I'm your host, Angela Gargano, 6-time American Ninja Warrior, keynote speaker, peak performance coach, and former biochemist. Every episode, I'm going to give you the mindset shifts and practical tools to shake off the doubt, reignite your energy, and remember just how powerful you really are. Because it's time to stop fearing the worst and start asking, what if it all goes right? What if it's already going right? Welcome back to What If It All Goes Right? I'm your host, Angela Gargano, and this is my doggy Pepper. And let's talk about something that no one really prepares you for. What happens when you start to change, grow, and level up? And then the people around you, they don't. And maybe you've noticed it recently, because I know I have. Conversations that used to feel easy now feel pretty draining. And the friends that used to hype you up seem a little uncomfortable when you share your wins. Your family still talks to you like you're the old version of yourself, the one who played small, who doubted themselves, who didn't ask for more. And here's the part that feels the hardest. You feel a little guilty. You feel like you're abandoning people, like you're becoming too much. Like growth is somehow this type of betrayal. But here's what I need you to understand. Outgrowing your circle isn't cruel and it's not selfish. And it's not something that you should apologize for. Personal growth naturally creates distance between you and the people who aren't growing with you. And that's not because you're better than them. It's because you're becoming someone who requires a different level of support, energy, and alignment. And the loneliness that you might feel right now, it's real and it's valid. But it's also temporary, because on the other side of this discomfort is a circle that actually matches who you're becoming. So today we're going to talk about the signs that you've outgrown your circle and how to navigate that guilt and the grief that comes with that. Yeah, grief. And how to truly set boundaries without burning bridges. How to find your new circle. The people who will celebrate your growth instead of feeling threatened by it. But before we get into it, make sure you're following What If It All Goes Right on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if this episode resonates with you, just take a quick moment to leave a rating or review. Please, me and Pepper would love it. It helps more women and more people find this show when they really need it the most. All right, you ready? You ready, Pep? She's exhausted. It's been a rough morning with playing with her friends. She's outgrowing them. Okay, let's start by naming what this even is and actually looks like, because sometimes you know something feels a little off, but you can't quite put your finger on it, right? So here are the signs that you might have outgrown the circle that you're in right now. Number one, the conversations feel draining instead of energizing, right? Maybe you used to love catching up with these people, but now every conversation, it kind of feels like work. And you leave feeling exhausted. Not because the conversation was deep or meaningful, but because you spent the entire time kind of editing yourself. And again, this is probably something that's unintentional that happens. Maybe you feel as though you can't talk about your goals because they'll think that you're being too ambitious or like you're showing off. And you can't really share your wins because they'll minimize them or change the subject. Or again, maybe it makes that like weird tension or uncomfortableness around everybody. And you can't be honest about what you're working on because it makes them feel uncomfortable or some kind of way. So you shrink yourself, you downplay, you stay very surface level. And honestly, that takes energy. This is emotional labor, the work of managing your own emotions and the emotions of others, and is one of the most exhausting forms of mental load. When you're constantly like code switching or self-editing to keep others comfortable, you're using the cognitive resources that could be going towards your goals. The second thing is maybe the people around you are celebrating your struggles, but not your wins, okay? So I want you to pay attention to this one. And it's subtle, but it's also very telling. When you're struggling, they are there. And they're going to comfort you, and they're going to validate you, and they're going to agree, like, yes, life is hard. But the moment you share a win, the energy kind of shifts. And maybe they change the subject, or maybe they downplay it. Oh, that's cool, but maybe they like one up you with their own story, or worse, they say nothing at all. And this happens because your growth challenges their comfort zone. When you were stuck, you were more relatable, right? But when you start winning, you become this mirror, right? And that mirror reflects back to them what they're not doing. And this isn't always conscious. It's not malicious, right? Sometimes people simply just don't know how to celebrate what they haven't experienced themselves yet. They maybe just don't understand it. But what you need to hear is that if the people around you can't celebrate your growth, it's not because you are doing something wrong. It's because your evolution is triggering them and triggering their own insecurity. And that's not your responsibility to manage. Another one is that your growth feels threatening to them. So let's dive deeper into that. You start setting these boundaries, right? You start saying no more often. You start prioritizing yourself, and suddenly they have a problem with it. Maybe at some point they've called you different. They say that you've changed, and not in a good way. Maybe they accuse you of being selfish or distant or acting like you're too good for them now. But the truth is, like, you have changed. And that's the whole point, right? But there's discomfort with your change. And it's their discomfort with your change is really the discomfort of their own stagnation. When you were playing small, they felt safe. Now you're stepping up. They're feeling left behind, right? And instead of celebrating you or even like joining you, they're trying to pull you back with them. And again, maybe not maliciously. And I want to point out the real hard truth about this is that growth will make some people really uncomfortable. And that's not a sign to stop growing. It's a sign that you've outgrown that dynamic. Another thing that happens is they still talk about the old version of you, right? They bring up old stories, old patterns, old versions of you that no longer exist. And they reference your past mistakes like it defines you. They make jokes that used to be funny, but now they kind of feel dismissive and they don't really feel funny anymore, right? They're stuck in a version of you that you've already outgrown. And every time they do it, it feels like they're trying to kind of keep you there. A reminder again, probably not malicious. But I want you to remember this, you are not responsible for making other people comfortable with your growth. Your job is to keep evolving. It's to not stay small so that they can stay comfortable. And I know this is hard. I've had this happen with so many friends and so many iterations of friends throughout my journeys, and me leaving my corporate job and doing these things that are a little bit crazy And it felt weird to kind of leave them behind, like it felt like I was leaving them behind. But the part that no one talks about is outgrowing your circle feels like this grief because it is, right? It's like a loss. Even if the relationships weren't healthy, even if you know it's time to move on, there's still this feeling of loss, like loss of familiarity, loss of this history, loss of a version of yourself that existed in those relationships. And then comes the guilt part of that, right? You feel guilty for wanting more than they want, and you feel a little bit weird about it. You feel guilty for changing when they didn't, for setting boundaries that create this distance, from not being available in the ways that you used to be, for moving forward while they stay stuck. But remember this, guilt is not proof that you're doing something wrong. Guilt is just emotion, and emotions are information. They are not instructions. So here's what the guilt really comes from, right? And I want to say for women especially, we're conditioned to be these caretakers, right? To put everyone else first, to be nice, to maintain relationships at all costs, even when the cost is your own growth. So when you start prioritizing yourself, right, your nervous system starts to panic. It tells you you're being selfish, that you're abandoning people, that you're not nice anymore. But niceness that requires you to shrink is not kindness. It's this self-betrayal. And the grief is real. That's okay. You're letting go of a past version of yourself, a past life that you've had. It's going to feel weird. It's going to feel uncomfortable. You're so allowed to grieve these relationships and no longer fit. You're allowed to miss people that you've outgrown, right? You're allowed to feel sad even when you know it is the right decision. Grief doesn't mean that you made the wrong choice. It just means something mattered to you, right? So what do you do with the guilt and the grief? Like, what happens after that? How do you move from it? The first thing is really sitting down and actually naming it. Saying to yourself, like, I'm feeling guilty because I'm prioritizing my growth over their comfort. Just naming it takes away some of its power. I always say by keynotes, you got to name it to tame it. Second, allow it. Don't try to logic your way out of it or convince yourself that you shouldn't feel this way. I want you to feel it fully, and then let's move through it. Let it move through you. And third, remind yourself of the truth. You are not responsible for other people's comfort. You are responsible for your own growth. And again, maybe it seems selfish or feels that way, but it's not. It's you versus the world, right? The truth is, guilt is not proof that you're doing something wrong. It's proof that you're doing something different. And your nervous system is just taking a moment to adjust because it is different. And it will feel uncomfortable. And that's okay. That is okay. Now, let's talk about the deeper psychology behind all of this, right? Because understanding why this happens makes it easier to navigate. What often is happening is when you evolve, you disrupt the system. And every relationship has an unspoken dynamic, right? A role and expectations and patterns. Maybe you were the friend who always said yes, right? The one who never challenged anyone. The one who was safe to be around because you never asked for more. And that dynamic kept everybody else comfortable, right? But comfort, as we're learning over and over again, right? It isn't growth. And when you start growing, the entire system has to adjust, right? So most people don't want to adjust. They want things to stay exactly the same because change requires this effort, right? It requires self-reflection. And sometimes confronting their own stagnation it's not easy, right? The part that really stings is that your growth forces them to look at their own life, right? It's that mirror we talked about. And when you start setting boundaries, they have to question why they're not also setting boundaries. When you start prioritizing your goals, they have to confront why they're not prioritizing their own goals. And when you start winning, they have to face the whole reason as to like, why are they still stuck? Your evolution becomes that mirror. And not everyone likes what they see reflected back, but it's so important, right? So instead of using that mirror as motivation, a lot of times they try and kind of fog it up, right? They try to pull back to where you were, because when you were stuck with them, they didn't have to face their own choices. I know it's harsh, but it's true. And the reality check here is that you can't dim your light to make someone else feel better about their darkness. That is not loyalty. That is true self-sabotage. And let me be clear about this. If your growth makes someone uncomfortable, that's information about them. It's not about you, okay? So keep growing. Keep growing anyways. So if right now you're hearing this and certain people in your current circle are coming to mind, that is truly okay, right? That's what this is about, reflecting on that. I know for me, it's coming to mind, and it's also coming to mind when like I was that person in the circle, because that awareness is important. But the good news is you don't have to burn bridges. You can create that distance without any kind of drama, right? But before we talk about boundaries, right, let's talk about honesty, because not every relationship that feels hard right now is meant to end, right? Some people genuinely don't know what they're doing, right? They don't realize they're minimizing your wins or keeping you small. They're just stuck in the same old pattern. And I've actually been on both sides of this, and I'm sure you've been on both sides of this as well. And sometimes all it takes is one honest conversation, right? One honest, hard conversation. They always say that some of the best things happen after hard conversations, right? So before you start, creating this whole distance, ask yourself, have I told them how I feel yet? Have we even talked about this, right? Not like hinted or assumed they knew or hoped they'd notice, right? I actually said it out loud. Like, hey, can we talk about something? I've been noticing that our conversations have felt a little off lately. When I talk to you about things I'm working on or the changes I'm making, it feels like there's this tension. And I don't think it's intentional, but I wanted to bring it up because this friendship really matters to me, right? Or even having this conversation with a parent, right? When I was up-leveling, my mom was like, oh my goodness, but it was because she didn't understand some of this stuff, right? So having that conversation was important. And then really listen, right? And some people will surprise you, right? They might apologize. They may ask what you need. They might start to show up differently themselves. And honestly, also on the other side, some people won't, right? They'll get defensive. They'll make excuses. They'll turn the whole thing around. But the response, right, is going to tell you everything that you need to know about whether this relationship can actually evolve with you or whether it's time to maybe like create some space and create a new one. So if you had that conversation and nothing changed, or deep down that the conversation maybe just won't land at all, that's when boundaries become super necessary. But the key is boundaries, and like clear boundaries, also kind boundaries, and these unapologetic ones. So what do boundaries look like when you're outgrowing your circle? The first part is limiting availability. You don't have to be available every time that they reach out. You don't have to explain why you're busy or I can't make it, but I appreciate the invite. Go have fun. That's a complete sentence. Like, you can end there. Second, redirecting the conversations. When they bring up the old stories or the patterns, you can say something like, I appreciate you remembering, but I'm in a different place right now. And just really put it, like, don't even engage with it, right? When they minimize your wins, say, hey, this is really important to me and it would mean a lot to have your support. Think how simple that line is, right? Third, declining invitations that do not align, right? Saying no more often. Saying stuff like, that sounds really fun, but not quite aligned with where I'm focusing right now. You can say, I'm prioritizing X right now, so I'm going to pass. And it's important to do that. And fourth, setting emotional boundaries. Hey, I love you and I want to be here for you, but I'm realizing that I need to step back from being your main sounding board for this. So can we find a different way to support each other? And again, these are not like, you might even be listening to some of these and being like, oh my goodness, I have to say that. Saying something like, I need to protect my energy right now. So stepping back from this dynamic is going to be important. If you need to have a bigger conversation, here's a framework that you can use, right? You can say, I care a lot about you and I value our relationship, but I'm in a season of growth right now. And that means some things are shifting for me. I need space, such different types of support, less frequent contact. And I hope you can understand. And again, that's a very generic way to put it. But sometimes it's really helpful to have those conversations. And what's important is that you don't need to like over-explain this. You don't need to justify. You just need to apologize. You don't need to apologize for prioritizing yourself, right? And remember this, boundaries without explanation are still boundaries. And say that again, boundaries without explanation are still boundaries. You don't owe anyone a dissertation on why you are protecting your peace. Okay. If it doesn't feel right for you, it's okay. Now, let's talk about the part that gives you hope, right? Finding this new circle. Because the truth is, when you outgrow your old circle, you create space for a new one, right? A circle that matches your current season, a circle that celebrates your growth instead of feeling threatened by it. And I want to give you a quick preview of what to look for, right? And then the next week, we're doing an entire episode on how to intentionally build your circle, okay? Because this deserves more than just a few minutes, right? It deserves a full roadmap on actually how to create this circle. So how do you intentionally find your new circle? First, they celebrate your wins without hesitation. So there's no like, yeah, buts, no minimizing, no redirecting, just true, genuine excitement for your growth. Second, they challenge you to keep growing. They don't just let you play small. They call you forward, right? They hold you accountable to the new version of yourself that you are becoming. Third, they match your energy and values, right? You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to edit yourself. You show up as who you are, and it feels supernatural. Fourth, they're doing their own work, right? They're doing their own thing. They're not just sitting around complaining about their problems. They're actually like actively working on themselves. They are in motion. And fifth, they don't need you to shrink, right? Your success doesn't threaten them in any kind of way. Your confidence doesn't intimidate them. Your growth inspires them. And here's a little sneak peek on where you can find people like this, okay? But the short answer is you find them in places that kind of scare you, right? A little bit in the rooms where growth is the normal, right? Through vulnerability, by being the energy you want to attract. But next week, I'm going to break down all of this, right? And exactly where you can look and where I found so many of the people that I've created relationships with and been in these circles of these up-level people. And let me tell you something, it did feel uncomfortable at first, right? So I'm going to show you how to actually push past that discomfort and start over, to be in those rooms, to be the new person in that room. So until then, here's what you need to know. The right people will show up when you stop pretending to be someone that you're not. Because authenticity is the ultimate filter. Authenticity is being the ultimate, like being actually you where you're at right now. That is the filter. It's going to filter those other people out. But the nuance is you can love people from a distance, right? You can honor what was without clinging to what's no longer. Because not everyone is meant for every season of your life, and that's okay. You know, all relationships, all people, they all have a purpose and a season. Some people were there to help you survive, right? Others are here to help you thrive. Both are valuable. All these relationships are valuable, but they serve different purposes, right? So what does this like loving from a distance even look like? You obviously always wish them well without staying involved. You remember the good without ignoring the reality that you've grown apart. You honor the relationship for what it was without forcing it to be something that it's not. And this might be the permission that you need right now, but you are allowed to outgrow people. You are allowed to evolve. You are allowed to create distance without guilt. It doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you someone who values their growth. And I want you to hear this. Not everyone is meant for every season of your life. Some people are meant to be a part of your story, but they're not a part of the actual destination. Some people are meant to be part of your story, but not your destination. I know this is a heavy episode, and I feel like what's really important also is maybe even reflecting on, again, even as I go through this episode, I just reflect on like how I was in a place where I could see that certain friends were seeing higher success and distancing themselves from me because I was in a different season. And allowing, like having the respect for that. Like, you know what? Like they are in a different season and I need to let them go, grow and flourish. And maybe I need right now was to take a moment, right? And that's okay. You're going to have these different seasons. But I think it's important to know that because I think sometimes we might even personally get offended by it and get frustrated. Like, oh my goodness, like, why don't they want to hang out with me anymore? Or I feel like I'm not hearing from them as much. But if you actually, reflect on it, you could actually say to yourself, maybe this person is actually, I respect them for going into different rooms that are going to up-level them because they're ready for that. And maybe you just weren't just yet. So just know it can go both ways of this, like, right? A lot of this we talked about was like you being the one who's up leveled, but also what about you being the person as being the one that maybe feels left behind? That allows you some great opportunity to reflect on yourself and reflect on, okay, cool. Like maybe I'm holding myself back. Maybe I can up level with some of these people, right? So I think that comes a lot of times, especially when you're getting this new space, but it's definitely hard to let go of people. There's some people who are just so nice and it's like, so great to be around them, but then you start to realize like I can't keep saying yes and going to this thing and doing this thing and being around this person because it's not taking me to the next level. They don't have some of the values that I want. They're not going to come with me in the next part of the journey. And again, it feels weird, it feels selfish, but it is so important. And I think through of it too as well, and through all my journeys and the people that, I'm still friends with all the people that maybe are in a different space than I am right now. But I think that you'll see that certain stay, right? I have one friend, Jess, I've had a friend for 10 years, and we've definitely had our ups and downs. We've had times where she was just peaking and crushing, and then I felt this way. And then we maybe weren't as close of friends. And then we have it switched the other way. And now we have times where we're aligned at the same exact time. So I think you also have that as well. And I think it's important to know that. But let's recap what we covered today, right? The first signs that you've outgrown your circle is that conversations are going to feel draining. They are maybe celebrating your struggles, but not your wins. Your growth maybe feels a little threatening to them and they're stuck talking about the old version of you. Second, the guilt and the grief, right? Again, this is normal. It's normal to feel both. Guilt doesn't mean that you're doing something inherently wrong, right? Grief doesn't mean that you made a wrong choice. It just means that you're, again, grieving that part. Third, why growth creates friction. Your evolution is going to disrupt some type of dynamic, right? And your growth forces them to look at their own choices. Fourth, communicating boundaries. You can create distance without any kind of drama, right? Boundaries without explanation are still boundaries. Fifth, finding your new circle. They celebrate your wins. They challenge you to grow. They match your energy. Do their own work, and they don't need you to shrink. And sixth, holding space for both, right? You can love people from a distance, and not everyone is meant for every season of your life. And here's what I want you to walk away with today, is that outgrowing your circle is not betrayal. It is alignment. It's alignment. You're not responsible for making other people comfortable with your growth. Your job is to keep evolving and to surround yourself with people who celebrate that evolution instead of resenting it. And the loneliness that you feel right now, it's temporary, because on the other side of discomfort is a circle that actually matches who you are becoming. So if you're in this season right now, right? If you're feeling guilty, if you're feeling lonely, if you're questioning if you're doing the right thing, I want you to know that you need to keep going. And you are doing the right thing. And next week, we're going to dive deep onto how to actually build this new circle, right? How to find your people, where to look, how to recognize them, how to push through the discomfort of starting over. Because knowing you've outgrown your circle is one thing, intentionally building a new one is another. And that's what we're going to cover next week. In today's episode resonated with you, make sure you follow What If It All Goes Right. Make sure you like and subscribe. Me and Pepper would super appreciate it. My little doggy right here. And take a moment to rate and review the show. And if this genuinely helps you, or you think it's going to help other women around you, these conversations are so important and they're so real and raw. And I would love for you to share it with your friends, because growth is hard, but it's so much easier when you're not alone, right? Until next time, keep showing up, keep growing, and keep trusting that what is meant for you will not miss you. Hey, what if it all goes right, right? What if it's already going right?